Have you ever found yourself standing at the precipice of change, only to feel totally paralysed by the enormity of it all? Whether it's quitting alcohol or making any kind of significant change in your life, it can really often feel so daunting that we don't feel like we can take the first step. In this podcast episode, we're going to explore the why behind the difficulty of change. And we're going to equip you with some tools and inspiration that are needed to take that first brave step. So welcome to the Alcohol-Free Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Connolly, and today I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Terese, who has been a mentor to me and is no stranger to making big change in her own life. She had a profound realization at the boardroom table a number of years ago, and she decided to leave behind the corporate world. She's now the director of Nidana Collective and the visionary behind her own kinesiology and coaching practice. Terese is on a mission to guide individuals and teams towards unlocking their full potential, and her work centers around empowering others to optimize their lives. In this episode, Terese is going to share her invaluable insights on navigating life decisions that demand a fundamental shift in how we navigate the world. Welcome, Terese.
Thank you. That all sounded very impressive. Thank you very much.
Well,
you don't realise, do you, how far you've come or gone until somebody reads it back to you like you just did. And I went, wow, okay, yeah, it's all true.
It's all true. And you, as I say, you've been instrumental in my own life as a mentor. And I'm really excited to talk to you today because, firstly, you yourself have made a lot of powerful changes in your own life.
And continue to do so.
Sorry?
And continue to do so.
And continue to do so because it's a lifelong practice, of course. We're going to touch on kinesiology and what that is and how that can be helpful to the audience. But first of all, the question is change. There's a whole industry out there based on helping people navigate change. Why is it, do you think, so hard for us human beings to change?
Well, it's actually quite simple as well as being really complicated because it all deals with and all centers around this thing in here, which we know when we talk from a very young age, this is one of the most powerful machines. And we don't even know the scope.
Just to qualify that, Terese is pointing to her brain here for those of you that are listening.
Thank you. The thing that sits between our ears, and we often hear that we don't even know the true scope of how powerful this is. And I often say we can use this as a weapon of mass destruction, or we can use it to enhance and elevate and optimize our life. But part of the problem is we're not educated on how to use it. You know, we don't get to use a manual of how to use your brain. We're taught at school on how to learn things and maybe creative thinking. But the one fundamental function of the brain is survival, to keep us alive, full stop. Now, the brain doesn't really care what life optimization is or what your happiness is or what's going to better you. It's there to keep you alive. So everything that happens through your life gets stored in there, whether you can pull it from the memory or not. And what happens for a lot of people is they go through life and then they get to a certain age where they start to notice they're recreating patterns, or they have habits that are bad habits or habits that do not serve them, or they keep attracting the same sort of things into their life, that although they say, I want something different, they keep reproducing the same output. Now, part of that is, and this is what I do with clients as well, is I start to unravel, well, why is that? And part of it will always be back in the past where the brain has collapsed an incident, something that happened inside of what you have made it mean and tied it all together, called it the truth, and then at some level either gone out seeking validation and evidence that it's right, or perpetuating the pattern to keep you safe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so let's just clarify what we're talking about. When it comes to survival, and the brain's primary function or only function is to keep us alive.
Yes.
And that is driven by the more primitive part of the brain, which is the one, and when it comes to alcohol, the one that really fires up as well. It's that fight, flight, freeze, reactive brain, right?
Do you want me to give you an example of this in relation to alcohol? Would that?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah.
Okay. So, a client of mine came to see me, and his wife was complaining that he was binge drinking too much, etc., etc. And so part of the work we do is unpack the understanding of why the drinking. It will always be somewhere in an unconscious state of survival, as contradictory as that sounds. So he grew up in England, and even as a child would used to go to the pubs. And that was a place of socializing and community, and that's where he always see his parents as happy. Now, as children, we don't have the level of filters that we have with discernment as we age. All the child will see is pub, alcohol, happiness, easy parents, right? So anyway, when I spoke with this client, I said, well, what would life be like if you didn't drink? Oh, I couldn't do that. Why not? Oh, life would be so boring. Oh, it'd be dreadful. It wouldn't be like... So what had happened is somewhere in his brain, he'd taken the association of alcohol and happiness and fun and collapsed them in together. Now, we know if we're happy and we are part of a community, i.e. at the pub, we know that belonging is a key part of survival because we need to be part of a tribe in order to survive. So if I think that if I don't drink, I will no longer belong, then that survival part of my brain goes, whoa, danger, danger, danger. Therefore, I have to drink in order to belong, in order to be part of the tribe, in order to fit in order to survive. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I think anyone listening can relate to one of the greatest fears that people have about quitting alcohol is I'm going to be ostracized, I'm going to be left out of the pack. And what you're explaining from what I can hear is that that is a survival instinct. It's nothing to do with anyone's willpower, or arguably belief system comes into play too there, right?
Correct. And one of the things I want to point out is because I say survival because it's not that the brain thinks it needs alcohol to survive, it's that it's associated alcohol with the experience of belonging.
Yes.
I'm going to give you another example too, is another client once again came to me because he wanted to quit smoking. And I said, okay, well, tell me, when was your first cigarette? And this is a key thing to think about. When was your first drink? When was your first cigarette? What do you remember about it? Because I often say to clients, we have to train ourselves to actually enjoy a cigarette or alcohol. Because if you recall the same first time you taste it, it's not a natural sensation that is enjoyable. We have to actually train ourselves into it. That's another whole conversation. Anyway, so this client was doing an apprenticeship as a chef, as a cook. And he noticed that all the other chefs would go outside and have a cigarette and have a break. Oh, I'm just going out to have a cigarette. And he started to notice that he never got a break because he didn't smoke. So he decided to start smoking in order to have a break. So guess what he started collapsing cigarettes in with?
Yeah.
Relaxation, a break from stress. Now, is stress bad for us? Yeah. So the perception, right, of calm and relaxed, not the reality, because we know that cigarettes are a toxin, but you can see how the brain takes what happened, we add meaning to it, because the brain just sees what happens, that's it. It is us that is responsible to add the meaning into it and collapse that whole emotional association all in together and see it as one thing.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important at this point to highlight that, yes, we do make a meaning between the alcohol, the cigarette, and the emotion and feeling that it gives us. But when we're also talking about addictive substances, that meaning is amplified by the release of neurotransmitters that really highlight that relaxation or that connection, right?
Correct. And that's why I say it's really simple, yet really complicated.
Mm.
So many nuances that go around it. And often with clients, when they see the what happened and then what I made it mean and how they collapsed it all in together, it is a life-changing moment for a lot of them. Now, does that mean that they automatically stop the bad habit immediately like that? I'd love to say yes. Unfortunately, there is the odd person that will. Majority, no. And that's where the next layer of things go on into the neurological pathways. You know, we have a saying, what fires together wires together. And you create those neurological pathways that start looking like the Grand Canyon. And we know those neurological pathways will always follow the path of least resistance. So those automatic, whatever the triggers are for any of us to participate in a bad habit, or the other flip side of it too, Sarah, is not participate in a good habit, i.e. the alarm goes off at 6 o'clock to go for a run and I hit snooze versus I get up and go for a run kind of thing. Flip side of the same coin.
So we can understand now change is hard on a number of levels, but a lot of it is to do with what's happened in the past and the associations that we've made and the neural pathways. And it sounds like we're kind of up against it when it comes to being, I guess my question here is, so change is hard. What is it that really then inspires somebody to say, I actually know now that it's time to change and I'm prepared to step into that process, do you think?
That's a really good question, because it's often something we work with, is inside of that ability to sit down and really look at the cost versus the payoff. So often what people are so attached to is the payoff I get out of this bad habit or avoiding the good habit, let's say. And we stay and we soak and we marinate and we collect evidence on how good the payoff is. Yeah? Very rarely do we actually step over to the other side and ask ourselves, what is this costing me? And I don't mean just ask it once, I mean ask it again and again and again. What is this costing me? And what does that cost me? And what is it costing my family? And what is it costing my friends? And what is it costing my career? And what is it costing my bank balance? And what is it costing? And once again, I use this in my work a lot. I have one client, again, smoking, was it smoking or drinking? Maybe it was both. And she said, oh, but I just enjoy it too much.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah, I get that a lot too.
Yeah, I just enjoy it too much. And I said, okay, so the payoff for you is that you enjoy it. So let's have a look at the cost. And I do this stuff on whiteboard. because there's something quite powerful that happens when you actually put a visual articulation in front of people. And I say, okay, the payoff is I enjoy it. It's a relaxing at the end of the day, whatever it was, a couple of things. And I said, okay, what is it costing you? Well, the first place people go is the money. Okay, oh yeah, well, that's all right. That's all about priorities. And then, okay, well, what is it costing you in your life expectancy? And then what is that costing you? I said, so what you're telling me is you'd rather enjoy this bad habit than spend more time with your granddaughter. She didn't really like that comment. And she said, oh, well, that's not true. And I said, well, from where I'm standing, it is, because what you're doing is you're not really leaning into the full frontal impact of the short and long term of the cost of you continuing destroying your health like this. And one of the costs is that you will die at a younger age than what you could possibly live to. And that means it will eradicate all those experiences that you can have with your grandchildren and your grandchildren can have with you. And it's pretty full frontal. I don't use those words lightly. I am a little bit known as the velvet hammer, but sometimes it needs the velvet hammer to interrupt the brain, because the brain isn't interested in what it's costing because it's so attached to the payoff.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so for somebody to choose a different way, to choose a different path, there must be, from what you're telling me, from what I'm hearing, there must be pain.
Ask me that question another way.
That if somebody is unlikely to change their behavior unless there is a real pain associated with continuing to engage in that behavior, that is more than the payoff.
Yeah, right. So they need to be willing to step into what it's them in every aspect of their lives and to lean into that discomfort. To
Because
lean into the discomfort.
to be able to tolerate the transition, which is for some people quite intense, the transition from engaging in that behavior to moving into a new way of being.
Yeah, correct. And there are multiple aspects to it. As I say, that's why I always start with what was your first drink? What was your first cigarette? Then your next one. And the crazy thing is people can always remember. They can always remember. And then the first part is start to uncollapse what you've associated with that habit.
Yeah.
And then uncollapse it and see it for what it was versus what you've made it be. So for example, the first client I told you about with the association growing up in England and all the socializing happened in the pub from being a child and growing up. And he still didn't get it when I started to uncollapse it. And I said, oh, by the way, and this it was being tongue in cheek, but I just wanted him to get it and kind of test it. I said, I love kids and I know you've got 3 kids. How about you let me look after your kids for the weekend and you and your wife go away for a weekend? And he said, what? I'm here for kinesiology. I'm not here for babysitting. And I said, go with me here. Let me take your kids for a weekend. He went, oh, okay, all right. And I said, now, I know that kids having fun is really good for them. And I love to have the fun with the kids. So because you've told me you can only have fun with alcohol, I thought we'd start the day with tequila slammers and work our way through. And he's looking at me like, and I said, well, you told me that if you don't have alcohol, there will be no fun experienced in your life. And it wasn't until I brought his children into it that he was able to look at it through another lens, because he's collapsed the word fun into alcohol and is unwilling at that stage to uncollapse them.
Yeah.
The moment I said to Mum, well, let's get your kids drinking then.
Yeah.
And he knew it was stupid. He knew it was crazy. He knew it was whatever,
Mm.
irrational.
Mm.
But it wasn't until I put it in that context for him to remove himself from it and therefore remove his association, that the ability to see it through another lens was the first thing that interrupted that perspective.
Yeah, got it. Got it. So interesting. Tell me more about kinesiology, because this is your area of specialty. And what is kinesiology, firstly, and how can that support this process of change?
Well, I like to say kinesiology is the most holistic modality in all natural therapies of complementary medicine because it deals with what it is to be human. So one of the first things we teach our students at the Nadana Collective is the triangle of health, which is a kinesiological term. So if we can imagine an equilateral triangle and one side represents the mental emotional, the second side represents the physical structural, and then the third side represents the biochemical. So the biochemical are all the external influences: pollution in the air we breathe, water we drink, air conditioning, things that we put on our skin, shampoos we use, and all those external things that we digest and absorb.
Mm.
I always say spirituality sits in the middle for whatever that represents to you. Now, in kinesiology, we know that if we have an equilateral triangle and we put a stress on one side of that triangle, it automatically impacts the other two. So when somebody comes to me with any ailment, pain, issue, anything, what I'm actually doing is working with their body's innate wisdom to bring them back to a state of homeostasis, i.e. a balanced equilateral triangle, so that the body can do what it's designed to do best, which is heal itself. Now, we use a thing called muscle testing, which is a biomechanical feedback mechanism that allows me to access that innate wisdom as well as the subconscious mind, which is a pretty powerful piece, because I don't know how much your listeners know about the subconscious mind, but 95 to 96% of everything that we do, think, say, action is run by the subconscious mind. Only 4 to 5% is our conscious mind. So we think we have choice. And again, this comes full loop back to your first question: why is change so hard? Because 96, 95% of everything is being driven by the subconscious mind. Anyway, back to kinesiology. So with kinesiology, I can actually access that subconscious mind and identify where sabotages lie, when they were created, what the body needs in a healing perspective. And I've got access to, I think it's 339 techniques, kinesiological techniques that we use. And we always say what we're doing in kinesiology is actually moving you toward where you'd rather be. Right? So we'll often work with a goal or an issue or something that you'd rather work towards and how you would rather be. So we're bringing the whole body and the being's energetic system back into alignment to be aligned with what you want rather than where you are. And as I say, it's so vast, and it's what we call bio-individual. So you may come to me because you've got a headache, Sarah, and you say, okay, Terese, I want to work on my headaches. Now I may have 5 other people that come to me with wanting to work on headaches that day, and we will do completely different things because of that bio-individuality. But I'm lucky enough to have this tool called muscle testing, where I can access the knowledge and the wisdom to find out what your body, your subconscious mind needs in order to heal itself.
Got it. So a client, and I've had lived experience of muscle testing. And one of the things that I really like about it is it takes away the thinking mind, which is what
Correct.
we can get really caught up in analyzing and overthinking.
Mm.
And so when you are in a session with a kinesiologist, it's not like a counseling session with a talk therapy, although there's a bit of that, but it's more the intuitive messaging that comes from the body, right? That is then translated by you through the muscle testing into the messages that we need to hear.
In part, yeah, because it's almost like one of the easiest ways to look at it is it was created by a doctor of chiropractic, a Dr. George Goodhart. Isn't that beautiful? Goodhart was his name. Perfect. So Dr. George Goodhart, as a doctor of chiropractic and Western anatomy and physiology, went and studied traditional Chinese medicine. So he merged Western anatomy and physiology together with Eastern medicine. So we work on meridians and energy, and it works on the energetic or the vibrational blueprint of the being.
Got it. Got it. So we've covered why change is so hard from a physiological and psychological perspective, and we've talked about collapsing things in our brains, making connections that lead to these ongoing habits that are so hard to change. We have alcohol and fun, and cigarettes and relaxation. What tools could you offer somebody that's listening that's like, oh yeah, I really get that alcohol and fun are very, very deeply linked in my psyche? What tools, if any, do you have that you could share with us today?
One of the most simple ones is start to change your dialogue. See, the brain does not know the difference between real and imagined. The brain listens to what you say and says, all right, thank you very much. Well, that's obviously true. I'm going to embed that one as well. So even saying, constantly repeating how hard it is to change will make change hard. One of my favorite things I say back to clients when they make a statement like that, oh, well, change is hard, or this is that, and that, I say, okay, if you say so. So that awareness of what your dialogue is, the conversations you have, and if you can start to really be present to the external and internal dialogue, then you have choice to change it.
Yeah.
But often what we're doing is we're on automatic pilot. Obviously, you can go and see a kinesiologist and you can get them to start to access it. But one of the simple things is listen to your conversation, external and internal, make a note of it, write it down, and then sit with it and read it back. And ask yourself, is that dialogue serving me?
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that we talk about in the program is I easily and effortlessly enjoy soda and lime.
Yeah.
And there's this, yeah, it's also so hard not to drink, but even just changing the language can be so powerful because it's like you say, our brains do what we tell it to do. So if we say it's hard, it's going to be hard. If we say I easily socialize alcohol free, then it shifts. Maybe not totally at first, but it certainly starts the process, right?
That snowball effect and baby steps. The other thing I would suggest is do that exercise that I do with clients on the whiteboard. Get a big piece of paper, write 2 columns. What is the payoff? What am I getting out of keeping this? And then what is it costing me? And again, do not just write down a dollar sign. What is it costing my health? What is it costing my relationships? What is it costing my family? What is it costing my life expectancy? What is it costing my work? What is it costing my sleep? What is it? And I can go on and on and on. But if you start to really do due diligence to that and be present, as I say, really be present with the cost of sustaining this habit.
Yeah. I'm just thinking it's like a cost benefit analysis that many of our listeners will be familiar with in their businesses. It's like you need to do the same thing with your life and your habits, right?
Yeah, and also another thing I would make a recommendation is start to be really present to noticing what are the triggers that flick that switch that make you go, I really feel like a drink. And often what I find with clients, it's a double-sided thing. Like, I want to celebrate. So it can be an elevated, uplifting feeling, or I've had a hard day. So it can be celebratory or it can be soothing.
Yes,
So
it's the
have a look. Yeah, but again, unpack those triggers. So what is it that I need when I feel the need to soothe? And then start to give yourself some other ideas. Okay, well, rather than having that drink, what if I took the dog for a walk?
Yeah.
Because remember that motion changes state. So the moment you get that trigger, you are in a particular state. Now, in that split moment, you have choice. The problem is most people do not perceive that they have choice because they are in what we call as kinesiologists a reactive pattern.
Yes, we call it activated. They're activated, right?
Correct. We call it reactivity in kinesiology. So there's a trigger, and then the body, mind, and I'll go back to the all three sides of the triangle start to get involved in that. If you can catch that trigger, notice the reactive moment. What do you call it, Sarah?
Activated.
Yeah, notice that activated movement feeling. And then if you can catch yourself in that moment and move in a different direction, physically, I always say is the easiest. Grab your keys, grab the dog, or if you don't have a dog, just grab the keys, go out the front door and walk around the block. Or if it's raining and you don't want to get wet, or where you live is freezing cold, turn on the music and dance around the house, because moving energies changes state.
Exactly. And this is so powerful because what we talked about earlier was interrupting the behavior. So it's finding the stimulus, the trigger, taking space, which is the space between the stimulus and the response that Viktor Frankl talks about so often or not often, but that's one of his most powerful quotes. It's that space in which we have the power to choose, and that choice is where our freedom lives. If we can just pause, notice the trigger, and change our state, it will change the outcome, right?
Correct. And it's like anything else. You practice that, you build the muscle, it becomes easier. I don't know if you guys have ever discussed the words can and can't in any of your previous podcasts.
Maybe not in a podcast, so go for it.
Okay. You want to notice how often you use the words can and can't. I don't believe in the can and can't with most things. Is it a can and can't, or is it will or won't? So even notice in your dialogue, I can't do that or won't do that. Oh, well, I can't do it because it's raining. So you get wet. Obviously, your health and well-being is important. If you're in 40 degrees below zero, don't go outside for a walk. But logic prevails. And yes, it may be challenging, but often people use the word can't as an abdication of accountability and responsibility what they don't want to do. And it's almost like a slight disassociation in being responsible for our choice. So, you want to look at how often we use that in conversation. Oh, sorry, I can't come into the city that day. Can't or won't? But it's not that I can't. I've got a car in the garage. I can easily drive into the city. It's not that I can't, is that I don't want to go into the city that day because I've got other commitments that are going to coincide with it. It's just a simple example. But that can and can't dialogue, good one to keep an eye out because it's sneaky and it's mischievous.
And it's disempowering, really, isn't it? The difference between I can't do it, which
Well, it's
implies
what we call victim mentality. Yeah.
inability versus the choice. I won't do it is much more empowering. So that's really, I think, just to re-emphasize the importance of language that we've covered today, the can'ts versus the won'ts, what was the other one we talked about?
Cost versus payoff.
Cost versus payoff, and the language of I easily do something as opposed to this is really hard.
Yeah.
Some
Being
significant,
conscious of your internal and external dialogue.
yeah, what you say inside and what you say to other people is quite transformational. Anything else, Terese, before we finish up in regards to change? And I think what I'd like to do quickly is just normalize it as well, that if you are listening and considering quitting alcohol, as an example, that it's normal and natural to have some fear, right?
Oh, completely. Because remember, go back to the beginning of this conversation. Your brain thinks it's doing it to survive. So it is normal to have that fear.
And so, what are your top tips for navigating that initial fear and trepidation? We've got language. What other?
Well, we've got language, we've got cost versus payoff, we've got the internal dialogue. As I said, go back and unpack where it all started for you and have a look what actually happened and then what you made it mean and what you've collapsed it into.
Yeah, and I liked as well your story about, if you do believe unconsciously or consciously that you need alcohol to have fun, take yourself away from that, especially if you have children or nieces or anyone that's not drinking it, and see if that applies. Is that true? Is it true that alcohol and fun are inextricably linked, or is it just a belief system that you've inherited?
Because if it is the truth that alcohol and fun are collapsed in and one and the same, then by mere definition, that must mean until the first time you ever had a drink, you never had fun.
Yeah. Oh, it's sneaky, isn't it, this stuff?
And the part of the problem is we're convinced and conditioned from a very young age inside of that model of have, do, be. When I have a drink, what I will do is be the life of the party and then I'll be fun. Or when I don't have a drink, what I'll do is sit in the corner and who I'll be is boring. The irony is we are human beings, not human havings, not human doings. Most of us go out there in the world and act like human havings or human doings. But consider the one thing that you have 100% control over in any given moment, whether you like it or not, is who and how you be in relation to what is in front of you. That is the moment of choice. Who and how am I going to be in this moment when a drink is presented to me? Am I going to be integrity? Am I going to be kind? Am I going to be healthy? Am I going to be whatever it is? And again, it's another thing, if you learn how to build your muscles on consciously choosing who and how you be in relation to anything that comes at you in life versus going into autopilot and being that reactivity, the reaction machine. And I often like to say, are you going to respond or react? Because reactivity happens in the unconscious mind.
Before the pause.
Correct. Before the pause. and putting that pause in, learning to pause, learning to consider, and lean out and begin to observe a little more rather than stimuli, react, stimuli, react, stimuli, react. Learn to notice the stimuli, give it consideration, give it pause. Remember, you are a human being, not a doing.
And that's a tough one for people in this world that we live in, where it's all about the doing and the having, right? Do, have.
Yeah.
I know that's something that you're very passionate about, is really educating people on how to be, as opposed to grab and have and all those extrinsic things that we're chasing after, as opposed to going inside and really finding out what it is that's truly meant for us and our lives.
Yeah. It always amazes me that, you know, in the work that I do, and you know, there's so much to spend your money on these days, and we're all in our Western culture obsessed with what we have and how we look and what we spend our money on and all these things. And I often say to people, well, what about investing and going from the inside out rather than the outside in? Because this body, this mind, this heart, this soul is going to be with you for this entire journey of life. So invest some time and money and energy into making sure this is running at an optimal level. Take care of the insides, and then the outsides kind of take care of themselves.
Yes, but that's not what the marketers want us to know, right? And this is the stuff that's not being talked about, which is, you know, everything that you have is here. You can't buy this stuff. The marketers will tell you otherwise.
Well, here's the irony, Sarah. My corporate career was marketing and communications.
Got it. So you've done a full 360, 180.
I'm now cleaning up the mess that I created, right? You're right, because that's what marketers do. They go out and they say, when you have this car, what you will do is drive down coastal country lanes with the wind. Yeah. And who you'll be is generally charismatic, carefree, handsome, beautiful, magnetic, and whatever. But the truth of the matter is, the car does not equal the being.
No, and exactly full circle to the collapsing of these ideas in marketing, and I'll bring alcohol into the conversation again. That the image of the sophisticated gentleman with the whiskey, or the young beautiful girls drinking the champagne, also helps collapse those associations, right? Create those associations.
And we've got to know too that marketing companies are very clever, because look at all the product placements in movies.
Yeah.
Subtle, but that is another form of marketing and advertising and association. I mean, Coca-Cola have got a black belt in delivering, collapsing that. When you have this, that's who you'll be.
Yeah. So we are required, if we want to create change, we are required to wake up, to acknowledge that there is this driving force that we're not aware of, the unconscious, the subconscious. We are to wake up to that and start to question things.
Yeah. Always go on the inquiry, because as I said, 95-96% of your everyday is driven by your subconscious mind. So start to pay attention to it. And if you want to know what it's doing, just look at your life.
Yeah.
Just look at
yeah,
because what you say you want and what you have, what you say you want and what you do, what you say you want and who and how you be, is directly driven by the subconscious mind if it is showing up differently to what you say you want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And a lot of people talk about that in the program. It's like, I know that I don't want to drink, but I almost watch myself doing it. It's this incongruency, this what we call the cognitive dissonance, that people can sit in for such a long time and not really understand why. But
That's a beautiful piece there, Sarah, because I'll often say to clients, knowing doesn't make a difference. I am sure all your clients are highly intelligent, educated, worldly human beings, and they know that alcohol doesn't serve them in the long run. They know there's nothing we can teach them about alcohol. I have the same conversation with people who come to me to lose weight, give up cigarettes, alcohol. I know there is nothing I can tell you that you don't already know about losing weight, giving up cigarettes, alcohol, whatever it is. And I'm not here to tell you what damage it does or any of that, because you know that. It's what you do with the knowledge, how you be in relation to the knowledge, that will make the difference, not the knowledge itself.
No, but I would say, and I would emphasize this in the alcohol piece, that most people sadly do not know the science of alcohol. It's not communicated. And this can make a massive difference in terms of reducing shame, which is one of the things that prevents people from taking action. So it is definitely a kind of combination of those, like you say, those three pieces, those three sides of the triangle, that when we bring it all together, it makes change a lot less daunting.
And that's because of that societal conditioning, right?
Yeah.
And that wanting to belong, and that piece of the puzzle that, and you're right, I grew up in a family where it was just common. Everybody had a drink at night, and it was just so normalized.
Yeah.
So normalized. And I would suggest, even at a young age, I didn't know that alcohol was bad for you until I got older. And look, let's be honest, the science coming out now compared to 50 years ago, or the studies coming out now compared to 20 years ago, the knowledge and the wisdom around it inside is growing. But as you say, it's not as commonly educated. We're not as commonly educated as what the marketing budgets are for these companies that go to the other extreme of that. When you have, then you'll do, therefore you'll be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've loved chatting to you today. Thank you so much for your time. I know that you have a program that you are offering through your organization. So do you want to say a couple of words about that in case anybody wants to learn more about Terese and her work?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. It's really exciting because we have a program, a course called Kinesiology for Wellbeing, or Self-Care Kinesiology, which we have on our website, the Nadana Collective Kinesiology Academy. And one of the things that you can learn at this, it's all online, so you can do it in the comfort of your own home at your own pace. There's 15 modules in there. But one of the things we teach you is how to balance your energetic blueprint to be more in alignment with what you do want. The other powerful tool that we teach you is what we call full body muscle testing. So we talked a little bit earlier today, Sarah, about muscle testing as my tool of trained, being able to bypass the conscious into the subconscious mind and access the healing wisdom of the body. In this workshop, we teach you how to do that on yourself. And to me, that's one of the most powerful, critical tools, that if you've got access to your subconscious mind and the healing wisdom of your body, imagine what you can start to unravel and rebalance in your energetic alignment toward what you do want. So I've given Sarah a 50% discount code for anybody that wants to take that on and explore more of kinesiology and what that could offer for your life. I'm sure you're going to put it in something to send out to everybody.
It will be in the show notes. If you're interested, and I highly recommend. I've actually done this course in person, and found it very, very transformative. So if you've been excited, inspired, or curious about what we've covered today, then I recommend that you jump into the show notes and check it out. Terese, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure to hear all of your wisdom, and I'm sure for people listening, to have given them a bit more of an understanding of just why this change piece can be so challenging, but also hope that it is possible for us to change, and that on the other side of the fear, there's extraordinary growth and opportunity.
Absolutely. And thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity to share what I love so much, which is one part humanity and secondly kinesiology, and how the two work so beautifully together. So thank you for the opportunity to share this incredible modality with a whole new audience.
Thank you, Terese, and thank everybody for staying with us and for listening. As I mentioned in the show notes, there will be a discount code for Terese's course. In the meantime, take care, and I'll see you on another episode soon.